We're now several weeks away from the election that was here in the great state of Minnesota. And as I talked about a couple weeks ago, there was a blue wave that swept through the state with the Democrats taking control of both the House and the Senate. And one of the key pieces of legislation that I think helped the Democrats take control of the House and the Senate had to do with the local market value tax credit, something each homeowner got here in the state of Minnesota just for owning a home. The program had been around for close to 40 years, I believe, and the Democrats did a great job of painting the loss of this homestead credit as, frankly, a tax increase by the Republicans. But let's really look at the way this credit worked, at least as far as it's been explained to me and I understand it. As I mentioned, each homeowner here in the state of Minnesota receives some type of a credit just for owning a home. Now, what would happen is then the county, our local counties, would then get that equivalent credit money that individual homeowners had, whether it was $200 or $300 a month, paid for by the state of Minnesota. The problem is, in the last 10 years, the state of Minnesota had only kept its obligation to make that payment one time to the entire state. Here in greater Minnesota, we got more of the money than communities in the Twin Cities metropolitan area did because of that program. However, even with the state not fulfilling its promises, it had resulted in communities like Detroit Lakes and other towns to constantly come up short on their local government aid, to the point where they quit counting on local government aid in general, as well as county support in the term of county aid. So that's where those losses and cuts in property tax increases from the local government kept coming from, because the state never paid that tax credit. It's why many people called it one of the most corrupt forms of government there is. So the Republicans, to end the legislative shutdown, got rid of that market credit. Now, in getting rid of that, they also changed the way property was assessed. And unfortunately, the changes to the way property was assessed probably hurt your lakeshore owners and your farmers the worst. However, certain small town communities such as Lake Park, Audubon, Wolf Lake, and others like that actually saw property tax decreases. In fact, in places like Lake Park, Audubon, and those two towns, they saw up to a 7% decrease in their taxes. Across the entire state of Minnesota, they saw a 1% decrease across the entire state in property taxes paid by individuals. I can't remember the last time a property tax decrease has happened here in the state of Minnesota. It's always increases. But certain individual people were required to pay more on their property. Now, that's one way to look at it. Now, Democrats are going to say they raised your taxes. The reality is, no, they didn't. You actually just paid the full assessment of your taxes. You no longer got a credit. So just think of any time you hear about a business getting a credit or anything like that, and the way they respond when they lose it, that's the way they feel when you lost your homestead market value credit. And how that impacts them is the same way it impacted you. Now, with Democrat control in the House and Senate, look for that credit to come back. So your property taxes that you pay as an individual may be less. But what is that going to mean for our communities as a whole? Because that money has to be replaced somewhere. So what tax increase are you willing to accept to make up for that homestead market credit? Or are you willing to just say, we'll pay what we actually owe on our property?